It all began with the mutiny on the British ship Bounty. The mutineers, desperate to escape British justice, fled across the Pacific Ocean, searching for a remote refuge. They eventually found what seemed like paradise. But this island's story was already written in tragedy long before their arrival. Centuries earlier, around the 11th century, Polynesians had discovered and settled on this island. They brought animals, crops, and culture, building a thriving community. The land was rich, obsidian, fertile soil, and crystal-clear water surrounded by an endless ocean. For nearly 400 years, they traded their precious minerals with the nearby island of Mangareva, about 500 kilometers away. Life was peaceful, a small utopia in the middle of nowhere. But paradise never lasts forever. After 4 centuries, the island's minerals began to run out. Without trade, poverty and famine followed. The once prosperous people turned on one another. Civil wars broke out, and with no way to escape, the Polynesians slowly perished, their entire civilization vanishing into silence. Centuries passed. Then, in 1787, Britain sent out the ship HMS Bounty on a mission to collect breadfruit trees from Tahiti and transport them to the Caribbean colonies as a cheap food source for enslaved laborers. But when the crew reached Tahiti, they were met not with hardship, but with beauty, endless sunshine, tropical fruit, and warm hospitality. For the sailors, who had spent years at sea, it was heaven. They didn't want to leave. When the time came to sail home, resentment grew. The men had tasted freedom, and they wanted more. Led by First Officer Fletcher Christian, they mutinied against their captain, William Bligh. Bligh and 18 loyal men were forced into a small boat and abandoned in the open ocean. Against all odds, the captain survived, rowing over 6,500 kilometers to safety, vowing revenge. Meanwhile, Christian and his followers returned to Tahiti, enjoying their stolen paradise. But soon they realized Bligh would come for them, so they fled again, this time with a few Tahitian men and women, eventually landing on a forgotten island, Pitcairn. At first, it looked like paradise again. Fertile soil, sweet water, and isolation from the rest of the world. But within months, that isolation turned into madness. There were 9 British mutineers, 6 Polynesian men, and 12 Polynesian women. The women were divided among the Europeans, while the Polynesian men were forced to share the remaining few. A cruel arrangement that bred jealousy and rage. Then came the alcohol. One of the mutineers, McCoy, learned how to make liquor from local plants. Before long, he and the others were drunk constantly. Their leader, Fletcher Christian, withdrew from leadership, leaving McCoy and others to spiral into violence. One day, McCoy punished his partner, a Tahitian woman named Tevarua, simply because she hadn't caught enough fish. In a drunken rage, he cut off her ear. Devastated and trapped, she took her own life. That single act lit the fuse. The Tahitian men, already furious at their treatment, stole weapons and rebelled. Within hours, most of the Europeans were dead. Only 4 survived, including McCoy. But the chaos didn't end there. The surviving Tahitian women turned against their own men, murdering them in their sleep, saying they were even more brutal than the British. Now only 11 women and 4 European men remained. As the years went by, the surviving mutineers descended further into madness. McCoy drank himself to death. Another, Quintal, lost his sanity and became violent toward the women and children, until the last 2 men, Young and Adams, decided to execute him for everyone's safety. Soon after, Young fell ill and died, leaving only one man alive, John Adams. Adams declared himself the spiritual leader of the island. He banned alcohol, preached Christianity, and saw himself as a prophet sent to create a holy community. Over time, he fathered children with many of the women, and a new generation was born, one that knew nothing of the blood and chaos that had created them. When a British ship finally rediscovered the island in 1808, they found a devout Christian community led by a calm, charismatic man, John Adams. The sailors had no idea that this peaceful society was built on mutiny, murder, and despair. After Adams' death, new leaders came and went. The island slowly became known to the outside world. By the late 1800s, Queen Victoria officially recognized the settlement. A post office was opened, stamps were issued, and the once cursed island became part of the Pitcairn Islands group, with Adamstown as its tiny capital. But the curse of the island's past never really disappeared. In the 20th century, Pitcairn's small population, descendants of those same mutineers and Polynesians, faced dark scandals once again. In 2004, several men, including the mayor and even the local judge, were convicted of sea, but the curse of the island's past never really disappeared. In the 20th century, Pitcairn's small population, descendants of those same mutineers and Polynesians, faced dark scandals once again. In 2004, several men, including the mayor and even the local judge, were convicted of child abuse and sexual assault. The island built its own prison to hold them. Years later, a new mayor, the judge's brother, took office, promising reform, but was later arrested for child pornography. By 2019, the island finally elected its first female mayor, a sign of hope for change. Even today, only about 50 people live on Pitcairn Island, and most of them are still descendants of John Adams. It's a haunting place, a paradise with a poisoned past. Once a symbol of freedom for mutineers, later a home to faith and isolation, and finally a warning about what happens when power, greed, and madness are trapped together in a world with no escape. If you ever find yourself near this forgotten corner of the Pacific, think twice before stepping ashore. Because history here doesn't just whisper, it screams.